You are live.
Good evening, everyone. We've got a few more minutes before we start. We'll be starting right on 7:30. Hein has sorted out all technical difficulties, so we're ready to go. We'll just have a little bit of small chat now. There's some good chat going between Dave and Sam, so we'll carry that conversation going, and we'll see where we end up in 4 minutes' time.
Dave, is it official yet in the press that you're the new head coach or new coach?
Yeah. The club released a statement a couple of days ago, maybe a week ago. So it's a good challenge, exciting season. So be good.
Good stuff. So nice. It's a move in the right direction.
Well, time will tell. Time will tell if that's the case.
You'll be all right, mate.
Got to make it into the Champions pool.
Yeah, that's it. That's the goal for this year. Well, that's kind of for the players to decide as well, but that would be a nice goal for me, I think.
It'll be great. It'll be great.
Depends on what the competition looks like, Hein. Any little hints about how you're going to structure that competition?
Pass.
Okay. Zane, any inside information? Phil, anyone?
I don't do inside information. I like the facts and figures.
We first need to get back on the pitch. There is some developments, yes, Dave.
Well, then Zane knows because he has his office next to you guys. So Zane probably is on the wall with his ears against it.
100%. I had to move into their office, so I even am more in the know.
And decidedly quiet at the moment as well, which is interesting. It's usually a sign of incrimination from a lawyer.
Yeah, well, you gotta pick and choose when you choose to speak.
Our
language is powerful.
Yeah.
Our office has gone digital. Our new office is called Microsoft Teams. That's the new office we're sharing.
Mm.
To be fair, I think this is the way of the future. Just work from home.
I know Nike's told their employees, at least in the EMEA, that they've been pretty impressed with how they've been functioning from a distance, and subsequently they're going to look towards more of that in the future.
I mean, look at the weather that we're having as a result of working from home. I mean, it's outstanding. Let's not beat around the bush here.
Yeah.
Today we saw Sam in his garden doing weights. It was amazing.
28, it'll pee down again.
Yeah. But did you? There's an article out now recently. I read it on LinkedIn or something where you actually you physically work more hours if you work from home than what you do when you go to the office.
Of course you do.
Of course.
Yeah. Your computer's there. You just keep going.
And you don't have commute time, so you might still end up You might still end up with more time on your hands because you don't have a commute.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Less colleagues to chat with, so that's better as well.
Yeah, less distractions.
Especially the massive distances you got to travel.
As
well. All right, Zane, I'm going to disappear here. And then it's all you guys. Let me just get this going. So.
All right, let's start. Tonight we're going to talk about game-based and drill-based training. We're pretty fortunate to have some great coaches with us, so I'll let them introduce themselves individually. Starting with you, Phil.
Hi, I'm Phil Leck. I'm the Technical Director of the Rugby Academy Southwest and Technical Consultant with Rugby Netherlands, and I do some coach development with Haarlem Rugby Club. That's me.
I'm Dave, coaching in Amstelveen.
Cool. Short and sharp. I'm Sam Brouwer, and I'm head coach at Rugby Academy Northeast.
So it's great to have you coaches here tonight. We've got coaches from different parts of the country, coaching obviously different clubs and a part of different academies and things like that. So we're actually quite looking forward to listening to what you guys have got to say. So we'll get going. What is it? What are we talking about? Does someone want to take us through this slide?
You with us, Sam?
Yeah, I'm having a bit of a lag. I'm sorry. Wait a second.
So this was a slide on the micro skills, meso skills, and macro skills.
Yeah. I think I'm there. Yeah. Well, obviously, we're going to talk about game-based and drill-based teaching, but to get it started, it's quite important to talk about the stuff which rugby has to offer, and that's a variety of skills, and we categorize those skills in micro skills, meso skills, and macro skills. And micro skills basically compile all the skills on an individual level, such as, for example, passing or kicking, also tackling, just one-on-one tackling. The meso skills are, compiled in unit-based skills, for example, a scrum or a line-out, or an attacking move by a backline, or a family of three doing the tackle and everything around the tackle situation. Macro skills are more team-based skills, and they're more concerned with the entire sports program of a club or a team. It could be defined as a game plan or general principles of play. And obviously, with the topic today, game-based teaching and drill-based teaching, it's what are we teaching? And we're teaching skills in general on different levels. So with these, as it says, with these skills in mind, our own development as a coach begins, but also the learner's learning will begin or can begin. Obviously our audience today is hopefully a mixture of experienced coaches and also maybe coaches who are at the beginning of their coaching career. It's good to keep in mind that this is our starting point when it comes to teaching. And hopefully our chat today, our webinar, will give some insight and maybe also leave us with some questions.
Can you use game-based and or drill-based to coach all of these different types of skills, or is game-based just for team-based skills, or can you use that to coach a micro skill? Or can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Anyone?
I think the genesis of part of the way this slide was, I guess the genesis of this was part of a conversation Sam and I had around what may be more pertinent in certain areas. So for me, I've been working quite hard on tactical aspects, in which case I tend to lean more towards game-based stuff because it's a little bit easier to coach the tactical aspects, which are less skill-based. But then you've also got the concepts to consider that decision-making is a skill as well. And that, maybe is easier to coach in some aspects in a game or in certain types of setups for drills. So I guess, certain things will lend themselves more, certain situations and focuses will lend themselves more to a game versus a drill, at least in my mind.
Phil, you got anything on that?
Yeah, well, probably.
I can see you want to.
Most people would know that I'm a games-based coach, basically, and we use that in every instance. And a little bit later on, I'll try to explain that through the processes that we're going. But that's one of the things, the slide that you just put up there now. So just empowering players to express themselves, to develop the skills under pressure and help them to process skills. And if you can coach that process through a game, what you'll tend to do is you'll tend to get players that can make decisions and have to make decisions on the game situations rather than a specific skill. So, if you're trying to teach a clear out, then there are 25 different clear outs or 35 different clear outs, because you'll see a picture with a player line over the top, somebody coming in from the side, 3 players against 1 player, 2 players against 1 player. So it's very difficult in a drill base to empower your players to see what's in front of them and react accordingly. So by putting them in game situations, those situations happen naturally, and that's when your coaching style can become a little bit different, because as long as you observe those and identify those, then you'll be able to create more situations for your players than just by doing drills. But having said all that, drills have their place in the scheme of things as well, and I'll explain a little bit more about that later.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to sort of different types of practice, block versus random practice.
I guess just to contextualize things for people and talk about different practice styles, when you sort of see coaching literature and skill acquisition literature. So a good example on the left-hand side of blocked versus random practice. So maybe to contextualize this for rugby, it might be such, the hooker throw is often, or the line-out throw is often what we use to talk about this. So instead of throwing 50 balls to 2 and then 50 balls to 4 and 50 balls to 6, you might say, listen, we're going to mix up where those are and I'm going to decide and call it out at the last second for you to throw to. And the reason you might do this is that you initially see a huge improvement with blocked practice, which is the opposite, so the 50 to the 1 position. But the durability of that learning is much less so. So what you probably see is the person getting better at the drill rather than them getting better at the skill, sort of in terms of durability and their ability to apply that. So there's a push in the motor control and learning space for this sort of more random practice rather than blocked practice, I guess.
Can you mix it up and make sort of different challenges as well? Obviously, competition is always good to develop learning as well. And
I actually use that exact example. I set up a bunch of cones around, I had a couple of hookers standing there throwing the ball at the posts as they do before training. And I set up 5 or 6 cones in different spots at the 2 different posts and gave them each 3 balls and said, you've got to hit 1 from each spot before the other one gets through. So there was a component of fatigue because they were running to get the balls. There was a component of random in terms of where they were throwing to, but then there was also the competition element. So they enjoyed it. And hopefully that starts to transfer to games in terms of pressure.
And so what you're describing there is a drill, and you talked about a game towards the end. How would you then layer it more and then move it into a game?
Yeah, Phil, I'm still working pretty hard at this. There's the competition aspect there, and I guess that starts to blur the line between game and drill. If you're talking about bringing it into more of a game, you might look at scoring points towards certain aspects. So quality of throw becomes a points, you accrue points for your team. So it might be that you've got lineouts going against each other. You get 5 points for steal. You get 1 to 2 points for an accurate throw, and you might get 1 point for winning that lineout on your own lineout. And you might go up and down the field, and there might be another component to that as well that might sort of gamify it a little bit.
Game Master Phil, you got anything?
Well, basically, I've never thought about that situation from the block and the random, but straight away I would play a normal game of rugby, but every single breakdown or every single knock on or penalty would become a line out, and yes, I would then make the hookers or the line out not have to throw into the same position ever. So if they came to the first line out, throw to 2. If they came to the next line out, it'd have to be 6. If it came to the next one, 4, etc., etc. But again, a great way of focusing that. Don't give them tries. The game's the game. But if your outcome is about line out and being able to operate quickly and accurately, then you score by your line outs and not by your tries. And don't worry about tries and game line success, etc. If that's what you're focusing on the evening.
When you look at the definitions of each style, especially for new coaches, I think it's a good thing to do a bit of research on, because obviously we're going into style straight away. Because obviously you're the master of game-based teaching, Phil. But
And you've got a nice shirt on. Mate.
The definition of drill-based teaching, the term drill is defined as a method of instruction with lots of repetition and perfecting a skill, just to keep it short. And
the art of it is to see whether it's going right or wrong.
Yeah, because it allows you as a coach. Yeah. It allows you to really focus on detail.
Yeah, and if it's going wrong, then basically you don't carry on doing what you're doing. You adjust to what needs to happen from there. And that might be that you have to take your hookers and your lifters and jumpers and do some technical work with them.
Yeah.
As in a drill. As I said to you before, it's not, it's not the be-all and end-all game-based coaching. It's a way of creating players that can make decisions for themselves in a lot of cases and improve the skill level.
Yeah. And so when you look at the definition of game-based learning, it's the approach is more to teaching a sport in the technical and the decision-making stuff more. Or wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back. If you look at a lot of people doing a rooking session or a contact session, you're going to get a lot of people who will just take a crash pad or a bag and have kids or players just running at that crash pad, presenting the ball properly, two people hitting the bag, and then and then playing the ball away from there, perhaps, or realigning and starting and doing the same old thing again. Now, to me, that's a little bit pointless because there are 5 other things that I want you to be able to do before you get to that point. So, if I've got a game situation, eventually you're going to have to go into contact situation and create a ruck. But before that, you could pass. Before that, you could use your ABCs, go past people. You could take the contact on your terms. You could offload with your left hand, your right hand, 2 hands. So all those things come out in a game and don't tend to come out in a drill.
I actually think, Phil, what you're talking about there leads us quite nicely onto this slide here, implicit versus explicit learning. David, I think this is your one if you want to take us through it. But definitely what you're saying, Phil, this is right on the money with these types of learning.
Exactly right. I think to probably use that segue you've created, Zane, is explicit learning is probably, to use that example, is, all right, guys, I want you to do these 5 things in cleaning out this tackle bag, right? Is that explicit? We're telling you what to do, so you're doing it, and they learn via that. And what you'll sometimes see, especially with guys who've been heavily coached in their life, they'll be able to tell you those things, and they may not be able to do them necessarily. I've come across this a couple of times. Is you ask the questions, they know all the answers, they can tell you exactly how to do it. The execution is not there. Versus the implicit learning, which is more exploration. I guess this is probably what you see in sports where there's much less coaching involved. Ultimate Frisbee is a good example of it because it's such a new sport. You start to see it in different ways of coaching. Game-based coaching is based on implicit learning, I guess. And to use the example before of Phil's sort of discussion is, if you don't give them too many constraints, the players, they may end up running through, instead of taking the tackle, they may step around, they may offload, they may do things like this. And they learn that implicitly rather than us saying, by the way, you can offload, or by the way, you can do a step, you can use your ABCs or whatever.
Yeah, for me, I mean, implicit learning is just giving them an opportunity to go and try and do it themselves. So after you've shown them, then they go try and do it, but in different situations or games with different challenges involved. And then by that way, they can solve the problem, which rugby is just a massive problem-solving game because it's so...
But there are still examples of good explicit learning. I use one from a son of mine who was very fortunate to play pro rugby and was going into pro rugby as a scrum half with no left-footed box kick. And so I just sort of made a sly comment about no left-footed box kick and you're going to become a pro player. And he went out and worked 3 hours without stopping on his left-footed box kick, which I thought was pretty crazy at the time. But then you come to a quarter-final of the Heineken Cup, playing for Edinburgh against Toulouse, and then puts the left-footed box kick up, which results in a massive gain, and then followed by a try. And you think, well, that goes back to that time on that training session when you were 18 or 17, and you actually did do that repetition and that technical, and listen to the technical part of it to then be able to put it into a game.
Yeah, definitely a really self-motivated choice then.
Absolutely.
But how do we feel then about looking at the younger categories in rugby at grassroots level, being 6, 7, 8, then 9, 10? What do you guys think on the uses of both learning types?
I think we can end up in a situation where we coach, overcoach a little bit, and end up with guys who struggle to be creative. They're so mechanical in the way they do things, and I think it's something I'm always really hesitant with is overcoaching, so that you end up with less creativity, less ability to explore and perhaps create that, special thing. I mean, Zane and I have talked about this previously, is without, in New Zealand or in Australia, there's a lot of unstructured play as part of like childhoods, or at least, many years ago when I was a child there was. So that sort of thing creates that implicit learning and that experimentation that I think we sometimes lack here in the Netherlands.
Yeah, classic example is backyard cricket, and you can you make up different rules, 6 and out, one hand catch, off the roof, all these sorts of things. Like you continually make it hard because you're constrained by your environment, obviously your backyard, and then you just make rules up. Or when you hit the ball, you have to run. Like there's no blocking. If you can block it, that's fine, but you've got to run. And I think it's a fun thing about play with when you're a child, is you actually are quite creative with those games. And I think, Phil, today you talked about that at the academy, just putting material out and letting the kids choose what to do. And then you just sort of see, it's a good way to sit back and watch and engage their understanding of the different things you've been working on, maybe in that block.
You see, you were talking there of overcoaching, Dave, and what I see a lot of is undercoaching. Because what will happen is they'll set a drill up, let's say, for example, a 2-on-1 or a 3-on-1, and then they run it and they run it and they run it and they run it and they run it to death, but don't coach it. So if you're carrying on doing a drill because you've got it down in your plan that it's going to be there for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, but the kids are not being successful, or the players are not being successful, then you as a coach, you've got to do something about that, and you've got to be able to, if you're going to do a drill base, you've got to coach the drill as well. You can't just sit there and expect them to just to do there. And we're talking about telling kids what to do and whatever. Just question them, because 9 times out of 10 they'll give you the answer, because they know 9 times out of 10 what they're supposed to be doing. And if we just give them the opportunity to actually ask the questions of them, get the right answers from them, and then go and put it into practice again. And we talk about why and how, and why are you doing what you're doing, and how do you do it, and was that successful? And if it wasn't, how do we do it differently?
Yeah.
Dave, we also talked about it recently on what Phil is saying now, but you said sometimes coaches also tend to ask the question which they probably know the answer that they're going to get. But
Communication.
Sorry?
Communication.
Yeah. But,
what could be better? Communication.
Yeah, but then you said you made an interesting remark about the difference between obviously a drill-based scheme or a game-based. You said it's way harder for a coach to analyze or see details in a game-based session.
Absolutely.
And,
yeah.
It comes down to skill level as well from a coach.
Yeah. you've got to pay attention, mate. You've got to be observing. You've got to know what you want to see and what you're trying to get out of the particular part of the game that you're trying to get to. If you don't understand why you're playing the line-out game that we just invented back there, if you don't know why you're doing it, then there's no point in doing it because you're just doing it for the sake of it. But that's the same as drill-based stuff as well. If you understand why you're doing a certain drill and you coach it properly, there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. And mix the things up. If you've got 2 coaches or 3 coaches in your side, have some skill bases so that you can just take a couple of players out at a time and just go through those little technical bits that maybe you couldn't do on your own. And I know that's a luxury for some people because most coaches will have 1 or 2 people and they'll have 20 or 30 kids to look after. But if you can actually build that into your coaching sessions, you will see a massive, massive difference. Because if suddenly your scrum half can pass off his left hand because you've spent 15 minutes with him, knowing what you want to see from him, improving him, and then putting him back into the game, you'll see a massive difference in your team effort.
Yeah, for sure. I think this constraints-led approach probably does well to sort of segue into what Phil was talking about before with undercoaching a 2-on-1 or a 3-on-1 or a 3-on-2 is if there's too much success or too little success, perhaps you need to change the constraints. So this is basically, most coaches, to segue back to previous slides, most coaches probably understand this implicitly, but maybe not explicitly. So this is the constraints-led approach. It governs a lot of teaching these days using both drills and games, and it's really about can we change the situation for the individual to change the challenges for them to solve a different problem. That's really the nuts and bolts of it is what different picture can we show them to try and make them have to solve a different problem. So it's changing balls, it's changing sizes of the field, it's changing numbers, it's changing situations that you start in. It's all of those things.
In your planning, in your planning, would you have those ideas written down so you have them at hand when you're coaching, or would you just go from memory, or would you actually plan that in to your training? I
use 2 situations. I guess the first one is I've got a good idea of sort of where I want to get to, perhaps, or the certain thing I'm looking at, and I've got a couple of modifications I can make if it's too hard or too easy. But every now and again, or maybe not every now and again, at certain times, I'll actually leave it with players and say, what's going well? What do you think we need to change in terms of, and what do you think of this drill? Should we change it? And sort of give them some ownership of that and see what that yields, and see if that changes the way things are being done, particularly if particularly if it looks like they're either too bored with it or they're sort of not engaging for some reason. Giving them a bit more ownership tends to then spur some more engagement.
Yeah. I tend to ask the question, how can we be a bit more successful when, for example, they're struggling in a game or in a drill? Just as you said, Dave, just give them a bit of ownership on what's happening.
And how does that work? The players respond well to that most of the time, or all the time?
Well, obviously, appealing to somebody's ownership and opinion is usually a great thing, I think. And in general, it gets great results. It gets your players involved. It gets their energy up. It gets their motivation up. To give them the feeling that they're obviously also a big part of what you're doing. Because coaching doesn't go without any players, obviously. But I find it really good to do that, and it's more fun as well, I think.
Well, just thinking about that just then, because it's partly knowing your player and knowing your players and what makes them tick and what doesn't make them tick, and what switches them on and what switches them off. And I can remember when I'd sort of gone through a period of going from a tell coach to a more questioning coach and then a mix. I can remember going back to Sale Sharks and thinking, well, next time I do the warm-up with Sebastian Chabal and Mark Cueto and Jason Robinson, I'll say to Sebastian Chabal, and how did that feel, Sebastian? And he would have just, and he would have just told me to get lost in French, as it were.
Yeah.
You know, some players want to be told what to do. Some people don't like having to make decisions themselves. You know, some people want winding up and pointing in a direction and saying, "Go and do that." And you know, every team will have that player. And if that's how he operates the best, then that's how he learns the best. Then you have to react to that as well.
Sam's played with a few players like that. Haven't you, Sam?
Yeah,
So have I.
we all did probably. But just looking at me, looking at my academy kids or youngsters in general, they have a strong opinion, and they generally know a lot of the game of rugby.
Yeah.
So I love to hear their opinion on stuff.
Right, on this slide, we've got the how and the why. I think this is important to sort of reinforce all the talk about game-based or drill-based, also implicit, explicit learning. Sort of brings it together, gives ideas of how you can do it and obviously why you can do it and what resources you have at hand at any training session. So I don't know, do you want to go through this, Phil? Or?
Yeah, it's just one of my slides, and it's just to try and just to give you some sort of ideas on games. You know, if you look there's a circle in red. You want to put a pitch out in a circle instead of a rectangle, and see what happens, and see what happens with the players, and watch wingers realising that they've just run out of touch because it's a circle instead of a rectangle. Then do an invasion game, so you've got to get into the circle or out of the circle. And then put a triangle together and then put teams together and try to score in between two posts and stuff and whatever. And watch them play against each other and fight each other and then gang up on each other to beat the other team and stuff and whatever. And, you know, all the time it's problem solving and it's physical and it's technical at the same time. You know, change the direction of play. You know, don't just play one way. Play in channels. Make them play. You know, if you want your team to be able to play wide, then reward them by putting cones out where they score more points if they score out wide than they do if they score in the middle. Use numbers of different players and change the game so that your numbers of your players change all the time. And so, you know, all the time, you know, when we did the analysis previously in Sharks, 32% of the game is 3v2s and 4v3s. Do we ever coach 32% of our training sessions on 3v2s, 4v3s? We probably don't. But that's where, you know, you can do miss 2, Rangi, pop 3, 97. But if you can't kill the 3-on-1 or the 2-on-1 at the end of it, then there's no point in doing the first bit, unfortunately. And
it's
again,
100%, I mean, because that's rugby, right? It's a numbers game.
Absolutely.
That's all you're trying to create is mismatches or 2v1s, 3v2s, 4v3s. That's all you're trying to do.
And we changed the size of the balls, the type of the balls. We're making pass basketballs, making pass tennis balls in games, and make them offload one-handed, two-handed, make them offload off the floor. And we changed the laws of the game. We play some things, Superman touch, where Superman can do anything he likes. He can be offside. He can kick. And it's amazing how they suddenly start getting creative, but have to solve problems and start making decisions. And that's the basis of the how and why. But all this looks a little bit like circus tricks. So you've got to audit what you're doing, and you've got to understand in your own head, why am I playing? We play a game called 5 meter continuity. Why do I restrict a player to 5 meters running? Well, in my mind, when you with the junior sections, you always have big boy, and big boy runs through everybody, and you plan A is give it to big boy, plan B is give it to big boy, and plan C is give it to big boy.
Yeah.
So if Big Boy keeps breaking through, everybody else stops and lets Big Boy score, and everybody thinks they're a great team. But if Big Boy can only run 5 metres before he has to pass, or every player only can run 5 metres before they have to pass, you get this amazing French continuity game where people are absolutely busting a gut to support the ball carrier.
Yeah.
So it's why do I do that? Why do I take away rucks and mauls?
Yeah.
You know, if I take rucks and mauls out of the game, what am I trying to achieve? Well, I'm trying to achieve continuity and whatever. If I take offloads out of the game, what am I trying to achieve? If I make the pitch narrower, what am I trying to achieve? If I make it wider, and as long as you understand how and why as a coach, why you're doing it, then there's a million things that you can coach through those games to get the outcomes that you want out of your coaching, and have a damn sight more fun as well, I think.
Yeah.
Probably that probably dovetails well into what Cripsy was talking about the other night. Cripsy was mentioning a move back to drill-based stuff, which was interesting to talk about repetitions, to try and get some repetitions in with his defensive work, which resonated with me at the time, possibly because I'm lacking some of the skill that perhaps Phil has in terms of really tweaking a game towards, okay, I need each player to get at least 20 tackles tonight. How do I achieve that? Because that's a really high-level coaching skill that we're all, most of us, hopefully working towards.
Phil, do you want to talk us through, like from the start, say a go-to game for you, and then how you would change it, and then what you're trying to achieve, just to give an example of an exercise from start to finish?
I can use that 5 metre continuity game because it depends on numbers to start off with. And the numbers decide the size of the pitch. So if you've got big numbers, it's going to be a big pitch. But if you're looking at contact situation where you want to see lots of rucks and lots of mauls, then basically what you do is you take away the ability to offload. So nobody can offload in this game. Now, this conditions the defence because the defence is no longer looking for offloads, and it conditions the attack because they're looking then to sort of make sure that they secure the ball at every single breakdown instead of being a little bit more creative. So also, you in that you get your ball stealing and your tackle and your jackal and all the rest of the stuff, and also your defensive system that you can put into there. Now, if you widen that area up, obviously then there becomes more space. So if then that you say to them, right, now you can offload, but you can't. If it turns into a ruck or a maul, you turn the ball over. So then you would change the whole focus of the game from contact to moving the ball a little bit wider. And if you had a 10v7 or a 10v8, and then try scorer just turned over and went on to the other side, you get 11v8 and then you get 11v7. And you can just mix the game up to get whatever you want out of it. And then we play in silence. So we don't allow the players to talk. And the first thing that all the coaches throw their hands up in the air and horrified because we want communication. But you'd be absolutely shocked and surprised when kids play in silence, how accurate they become with the passing and how accurate they become with the support play. Because they have to make decisions very, very quickly, not based on vocal decisions, but on eyesight and peripheral vision. So you would just use all those little different things there. If your guys weren't making the game line, you can change that game again by changing one of the laws so that you don't have tries. But if you make 5 meters running and then use your ABCs, you get a point instead of there. And if the defence smashes you back 5 meters, they get a point. So you can change the point system. If you want to then say, I'd like us to be able to play a lot wider than what we do at this moment in time, make the scoring zones out wide. We use little things like gates just to encourage people to, you might put a couple of gates really wide on nearly on the try line and make sure that they've got to go through 2 of those gates before they score. And that encourages them to realign. It encourages them to counterattack. It encourages them to use the brain because they've got to move the defence about to where they want to be. So in that one little game, you've basically covered all the long-term athlete development requirements for probably 14 through to 18, just in one little game. And again, you might not do all of those things in the same game, because that's pretty unrealistic. But again, it's what you want to get out of it, and then tailor the game to what you want to get out of it with your team.
I think that's great because it shows like from one basic starting point, you can go wherever you want.
And the kids love playing a game. They want to play games. And most kids, if you ask a kid whether he'd rather play a game or do a drill, there's generally one answer.
Just before we get to a couple of questions, I'm actually going to put you guys on the spot. And you're going to do a bit of work for me, actually. Rugby clubs are going back. The Prime Minister's announced that. And there's 3 age groups. There's a big age group that actually have to stay 1.5 metres away. In the game of rugby, we like to be nice and close and cuddle each other like Sam cuddles David often. So what sort of ideas do you guys have as coaches as to what exercises you could safely do as a result of the 1.5 metre distance? Let's assume you can pass balls between one another and sort of use equipment. Let's put our heads together and come up with some stuff. But could be game-based or drill-based.
Yeah, or both. Both learning types probably have enough in it to make a good training session in these strange times. Passing a ball requires a bit of space usually, so there you got the 1.5 meters or wider to play with.
Play 7 on full pitch.
Yeah, and the big thing, obviously, as you said, because that's what I'm really concerned about, is using materials, using a ball, which goes hand to hand. And obviously, you said assume it's okay, but then you have a pitch like 110 meters by 60 meters, which can be used quite good, I think.
Yeah, you can do. Look, the easy answer is things like, let's look at basic skills as something that's, an opportune time to look at. So kicking, passing, those sort of things, evasion skills, depending on how much you want to manipulate what Zane's told us as a, beat the game type scenario, you could use, you could give them a ball and, the ball can touch the other people. So you could use evasion aspects where you're trying to get them to touch each other with the ball. As something like that, to talk about primary support. There's all sorts of things you could do with it. It requires some sitting and thinking. It probably requires 50% more work to really think through it if you want to get really creative.
Yeah. Play some New Zealand touch. We call it New Zealand touch because I saw the New Zealand Sevens, because the defenders have got no arms. So the only way that you can get anywhere close to anybody is to get your shoulder towards them. So if anybody comes close enough to get a shoulder, then you stop and play away. And the defenders really have to work hard on the footwork to get into play. So if you played that 5 or 6 aside with the width, you'd get lots of passing, and basically the attacking side just keeps scoring. So you score on the try line, and then the defence defends again. And you play 2 minutes each and see how many tries you can get without anybody touching you.
Yeah. A mate of mine mentioned that he is also coaching, and he mentioned that he wanted to buy like a meters long soft stick or whatever, and use that. Give the defense a soft, long thing to touch with, and play a game where you have some overlap and big spaces, so it's great conditioning as well.
It's a good idea.
Yeah, can play a variant, like a hybrid sort of Australian rules football and ultimate frisbee. So any drop ball is a turnover, no touching your man, but it's about kick passing. So you're trying to develop kicking and catching skills with a high ball. and then you score via kicking it through posts.
Yeah, definitely.
Any other sort of games like a different sport that we maybe could use at this time?
Look, ultimate frisbee is probably the thing I've mentioned more in the last last 40 minutes than I have in the rest of the year. But it's a really fun game to play, with the exception of possibly a bit of wind about the Netherlands. But unbelievable conditioning aspects to that, and speed work particularly, as well as change of direction. Some important hand-eye stuff because it floats very differently. So it's a really I've never met anyone who doesn't love playing it. All shapes and sizes. So it's probably the first one I'd go to. You could probably play some cricket, Zane.
Yeah, good.
Play the cricket bat and ball.
Play some football.
Some kicking and counter-attacking games as well, which use the full width of the pitch. Lots of ideas actually.
Thanks. I think that was great. I think different types of ideas there, and just to keep the coaches thinking. I think you're only limited by your imagination. You just have to remember the health and safety comes first, and make sure you're doing things within those parameters. And then obviously you can do sort of what you want. Because at the end of the day, it's just about, like you said, Phil, having games and keeping kids to have fun. They just want to have fun.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got a question from Jonathan Flynn. And this is going back to the player that just wants to be told. Do we keep just telling them what to do, or do we try and change them, or try and challenge them in another way, in a way to be more?
It's like an infant, isn't it? You try and wean them off it.
Yeah. Okay. So you're saying it is possible to gradually get them used to not just being told what to do, but thinking about what to do.
Yeah, when push comes to shove in a rugby game, the player needs to think by himself. So obviously, character-wise or personal style of teaching, being told what to do, you have to at some point make your own decisions in the game. And I think we need to try to teach them and to provoke them to make their own choices. And then failing as well, obviously.
I think for me, this has sort of come down to like a couple of aspects. Like one of them is, do you prime beforehand or do you sort of review afterwards, right? So you could prime that player and say to them, listen, mate, I'm not going to give you anything tonight. You have to do this. You have to work it out for yourself. And the reason is because you need to develop that as a rugby player in life. And that will come back to then how well you know your players or what you understand their goals to be in rugby or in a more broader sense. Or you let that happen intrinsically. You watch them get really frustrated, but then you have to debrief really well with them and make sure they understand that, that this was done for these reasons. And that sort of helps you buy in, because if you don't do either of those things, you don't prime them, you don't have explanation to them, you don't debrief with them afterwards, it can be really challenging to get buy-in and sort of not have a really negative feeling from that player to you. And that's going to affect their learning as well.
But if you target them with two things to do in the session, and then question, why have I targeted you to do that? They'll start thinking before the game, and then they'll try to put those two little things in. If you try and give them six things, then that generally will overkill them, and they won't do any of the stuff. They'll just go back to type, because rugby players go back to type when they're under pressure. So when they're under pressure, suddenly all the old stuff that they did before comes back out of the closet 9 times out of 10, instead of the new stuff that they've learned.
Yeah, it's then probably almost like a fight or flight situation. Because they're so stressed, and they go in survival mode, so to speak.
It's what they know.
Yeah.
And then this is the other part, is imparting knowledge on your players. One of the best exercises I've ever done with rugby teams when I go and coach them is I ask them why they box kick. Literally just ask them, sit them down and ask them, why do you box kick? And you should hear some of the answers. It's unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable.
Can you share some, Phil?
To buy time. One guy said to buy time. And I just went, I wish I could do that, mate, because it's passing away a lot faster than I want it to. But it just, none understand. Why do you do it? Well, we've always done it. Yeah, but why do you do it? And what's the process behind it? And what's the outcome that you want from it? Oh, to clear my lines. Well, okay. Well, what about retaining possession? Oh, how do you do that? Well, this. Try this. And that's, the why, the how and the why is massive. Massive. And again, if you explain that to people and you explain what you want to get out of stuff and why you're doing this stupid game, why are we playing kabaddi? Because we play a little Indian game called kabaddi, which is a
great game.
Yeah. It is a great game. You'd look at it and you go, well, where does that fit in? And then audit it, and you'll find that it fits into 20 different places in the game.
Yeah, and the basic concept of rugby, risk and reward. What are you going to risk to get your reward?
Absolutely. Yeah. How can you move the defence about, and how can the defence move themselves about to stop somebody doing it? I apologise if coaches out there don't know what kabaddi is, but Google it and watch some really, really quality. Because in India and Pakistan it's professional and villagers play each other, and there's leagues and everything. It's awesome.
And we've got some good comments from Eric in terms of this slide, and maybe adding different ideas like tasks, also material like Scrum Machine versus Live Scrum and stuff like that. And I think that's great. I mean, you can build this slide as a coach as much information on it as you like.
You have to keep it simple because it's that same process. Keep it simple, stupid. Don't overcomplicate stuff. You don't need to complicate stuff. Rugby is a really simple game. Go forward, pass backwards, keep the ball. And if you can do that well, by doing drill coaching or game coaching, then you're going to win.
It probably brings me to a point I was going to ask you about before, Phil, was quite a few times I've used a game, set a set of constraints with the hope of seeing a certain outcome. We're going to constrain it by mandating a certain number of passes, so I'm anticipating that the play style then changes this way. And I've often seen something completely different. Is that, in your experience, is that a common occurrence, or is that probably my inexperience showing through?
No, it's great. If you see something different, then you've got a different outcome.
I think that resonates on your implicit learning, right?
Yeah.
If you suddenly see something else happening, be it negative or positive, there'll be a reason behind that, and that might be your game and your laws and your rules and your coaching. And in that instance, take that as a positive, reflect on it. Why did it happen like that? Well, because I restricted the passes too long or too short, or however you did it. But get something out of it, but try and get your players to explain why it's going wrong. Because if they find that they can solve that problem, they'll solve it on the pitch.
We've got a good comment from Jacques as well. He sort of is talking about what you guys were referring to before when under stress, players going back to type. And he sort of said that when they're fatigued, they also do that. They stop thinking. And I think that's another element of this, the how and the why, is it's great to fatigue the players and then put them into a attentional focus type scenario. And then you're really testing their learning, because they will go to type. So if they don't actually have that learning or that real understanding, then they won't do it. They won't understand, and you'll see it. And then you'll see careless errors. So you won't see constructive errors. You'll see very careless errors, and that's clear to see. And I think that's a good thing to do sometimes, is definitely to fatigue the players, because like you say, you can't always stress them, but you can definitely fatigue them, and then see sort of what they do.
Yeah.
But you see, then you ask the coaches, how would you fatigue your players?
Yeah. So how would you guys fatigue them?
Easy answer is big field. Big field, small numbers. Doesn't take long.
True.
That or something like any defender who touches someone has to do X number of whatever's, push-ups, burpees, get to the ground, whatever. You spread them out, you create holes. It makes it a lot more. You can play turn and burn. So if they score, they turn around and attack straight away. Things like that. Everyone has to be in a certain area when they score the try. Things, all those things will fatigue them really quickly.
And then you move into the exercise you wanted to test them on.
Yep. Or you just vary the game to start with and then narrow it up. So you could use the same game, fatigue them intentionally with a different set of rules, and then change it back to the way you intended initially.
Yeah, but suicides would do the same job, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Sure. I once coached a guy who said, I'll run that hill when we play rugby on a hill.
I've played on hills.
Yeah.
You want to play in Belgium?
You want to go to Cumbria, mate, in England?
This is Phil's last slide, and I think probably sums it up really well in terms of what we were talking about with the sort of undercoaching before.
Yeah, basically what I'm trying to get through to everybody in this instance, we had a conversation this afternoon and said, what would you do if you'd got a player that really just started? Can you do game play coaching instead of skill-based coaching with a brand new player? And most people would say, well, no, you need to teach him how to pass, you need to teach him how to tackle and stuff and whatever. But you can create games without killing people to see exactly what the skill level is of that player. And so what I'm trying to sort of preach to coaches is that they can use game-based coaching for every skill level, from elite players all the way down to under sixes and kids that are just starting, or players that are just starting the game. And the thing that you've got to have big observation skills, massive. You've got to see things, and you've got to want to see things. And you're not going to stop the game every 2 minutes, but if there's something not going right, you need to question why it's not going right, and don't be frightened to stop the game and then start the game again. The technical knowledge. Know what you want to see, or know what you want to have happen out of the thing. Why do you want to play twice open and one blind? Know why you want to do it, and then your players will understand that you understand what you're trying to get out of it. The creativity bit is in the right levels, because you can go mental, you can go silly, you can go and do as many silly little games as you like, but your creativity's still got to be there. Always be, ready to look and adjust. One of the games I did with Sasha, the Dutch ladies sevens coach, when she came to do with the academy, she was doing she got the tubes up, and basically you'd got to touch a tube with the ball without knocking it over to score a point, and then pass away and play and play and play and play. And I thought, well, why don't we turn that into a contact game, so that if the defender was in front of the tube, he would have to use line speed to go and tackle the attacking player, or else the attacking player would just knock him over and knock the tube over. So we turned the game round, and we got another benefit from a great little game again.
Yeah. And that's the biggest challenge as a coach to do the adaptation and to use the variables and to recognize where opportunities lie in your drills or in your games.
Yeah.
And also
back myself to learn these things. They don't come overnight. That's exactly right. But you've got to know when to, I call it, push or pull the game. So if, for instance, I went and did a session with a ladies team, and apologies if there's any ladies, I sort of went into it with a little bit of I'm going to start really, really basic and then start whatever. And the stuff that I did to start off with, they just ripped it up in 2 minutes. Absolutely got it straight away, bang, straight away into it. The skill level was twice as high as what I expected it to be. So I had to push myself and push them to the next levels to make the session right, or else it could have just fallen on its face, because the stuff that I'd planned was rubbish for them after what I'd seen them do in the first 10 minutes of the session. And, from a player's point of view, there's got to be an open mind to it. You've got to understand, and you've got to get over as a coach why you're doing some of the things that you're doing. Because you're not going to do this for 100% of your sessions, but you'll do it for a percentage or a part of your sessions, which will improve your players' skills and decision-making process. They've got to be willing to learn. They've got to be willing, say, some of my old players, you'd never get them to do this. Well, trust me, you can. And it's been done time and time and time again.
Yeah, that's a big difference, obviously, between a game-based setting or a drill-based setting. That the engagement of your players in a game-based situation, in general, is a bit higher than a drill-based situation. But still, I think using a drill-based learning situation still has its advantages. Obviously, the repetition that Cripsy also talked about on tackling, for example, such a specific skill to teach. Needs sometimes to be very controlled and focused on details as well. And obviously the repetition, the high repetition of a drill. And I think it also ensures a basic level of confidence for a player, especially if he sees his peers throwing big passes and he not can do it, and then he tries it in a bit more controlled drill. Just give him the repetitions he needs just to sort it out.
But I call 20 players, Sam, 18 or 19 or 17 of them or 16 of them might be able to tackle perfectly well. So what you've got to try and do, and this is where I say with these skills bases, we tried to put in a little skills base so that you can take the players out that are struggling and give them that technical input while the others are still playing the game. Because it's like know when to push a player or a group of players and know when to pull a group of players if you get the basics. And so you're exactly right. When I say throw a kid in to start off with, he's not going to be thrown into a full contact tackling game. He's going to be thrown into a conditioned game where he can show me whether he can do the basic run forward, pass backwards, and whatever. Yeah. And if he can do it under a little bit of pressure. And I control the pressure of the game as the coach, and we progress it from there based upon that. And it might only be 3 against 2 or 4 against 3 while everybody else is doing something else.
Probably brings this slide up well, isn't it? It's just that you can take what most people think is a drill and then change it enough so that a lot of people in the audience might then say it's a game. So it's a pretty blurry line at times.
Yeah.
Does it matter? I mean, I'm looking at the sentence. Does it matter? We can call games drills, games, whatever. As long as you understand the difference between sort of the difference between the game and every other type of coaching, then it's not a problem, I don't think, because a good coach will use the whole of his armory and the whole of the things to use. Just because I possibly use more games than drills doesn't make me a better coach than anybody else.
And I think that's a good point, Phil. I think the first thing you have to look at as a coach is what is your coaching philosophy? Absolutely. What are you passionate about? What are you best at? And like David's saying, like he's trying to develop more of the game side. And maybe that I could say the same. I'm trying to develop more of the game side. I've come more from a drill-based coaching sort of environment, or sort of I learnt that way. That's how we learnt. We learnt through drills, and we got told what to do. And if you didn't do it, you got subbed. And that was simply how it worked. But these days it's a little bit different. You've got a different generation of players that sort of have a broad base of knowledge and they want rewards now, and their attention span is about 7 minutes, they reckon. It's not a long time. No. So you've got to be able to get them going pretty quick. So not a lot of talking, and often it could be easier to continue, like you say, Phil, get them in a game and then just pull some of them out at different times and then get them back in the game or what have you. That could be a good way of keeping them engaged in sort of the training, and you can get what you want out of it. But for me, as a coach, the first thing you need to know is what your coaching philosophy is.
Yeah. And what coaches I find, they don't understand it. It's like Dave's going to go and coach Amstelveen, and Dave will already have in his mind how he would like to play the game. And Amstelveen players might have a totally different idea of how to play the game. So sometimes when you go into a new situation or a new team or whatever, you've got to have a look at what the team's capable of and then adjust your coaching to suit the team to get them towards where you want to get to later on.
This is a discussion I had with Hein. Was the best example of this is football, where you have two options: play a formation and then find the players for it, or look at your players and then set your formation. And we have a similar aspects in rugby: is do we want to play a certain way and have to go find those players, or do we have to play to the players we have? And in most club settings and most amateur settings, you take the best 15 you've got and then work out the best way to play. Maybe in Zane's situation or someone else's situation, you may be able to select players based on the style you want to play rather than having to just pick your best 15 and hope.
Yeah, but if you're lucky enough to raise yourself to coach an international team, that's the time then that you get to select what you want for your way of playing. 9 times out of 10. So that's one of the few times that you, unless you go to a club with a unlimited budget, then you're in that situation.
Right, thanks, gentlemen. Great chat. I enjoyed it. Learnt a lot. We welcome back Hein, the boss man. He's got some words to add to the thing.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Before we say goodbye to everybody out there, please, just a reminder, we have the license system within Rugby Netherlands. So please send the email to Joanne at licentie@rugby.nl. Underneath the opleiding badge, there's at rugby.nl. You can read a little bit more. This also gives you access to the Coach Now platform, where we will share these PowerPoint presentations with you if you want them. And we'll try to make the necessary changes, Eric, as you recommended, which are good ones. Next week, Zane, we got a very interesting lineup. Tuesday night, me and Cripsy are back to follow up on our talk on defense. We're talking about defensive systems, and Andrei Trudeau is joining us all the way from Mother Russia. He's currently the head coach at Slava Moscow. Comes through the systems, Free State, all those systems in South Africa. And then on Thursday night, the good old debate. Mats Marker, Frank van der Hevel and Ronald Burfoots will be in, and they will be talking about structured attack, 1-3-3-1 or 2-4-2, which we touched a little bit with David, versus the all-out, play what you see in front of you French family system, which will be another interesting debate. That one will be in Dutch for you guys. And Taman will be our facilitator for that one, and promise to be there will be subtitles at the bottom in English for our international viewers in Spain and Sweden that are joining us. David, Zane, Sam and Phil, thank you very much for your input tonight.
Pleasure.
Really, really much appreciated. From a South African background, it's drills all the way. And you play the game on a Saturday between the four lines. So, no, I'm just joking. Thank you very much, gents. Much appreciated. And to all the viewers out there, please join us again on Tuesday night, 7:30, same time, same place.
Everyone, stay safe.
Yeah, stay safe.
You guys.